Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most morally challenging case that you've worked on? I represented a mom in a custody case. Both parents fighting for primary. Mom was admittedly a mess and suffering from some mental health issues. Dad took the kid and didn't bring them back for a few months in violation of the order. I got the kid back. Then met with mom and kid and realized kid was doing way better with dad and should be with him. Tried to reason with mom. She didn't listen. Ultimately the child protection office got involved and child was placed with dad. I last saw mom many years ago and she was still not in a super healthy place and child was still with dad. So best ending happened and not because of me. Edit. Words to make things more clear. Family law attorney here. I've done plenty of divorces and custody dispute cases. That most stuff doesn't get to me. It's only when the kids are put in a bad situations between one or both of the parents being some type of addicts that really gets to me. One that was especially hard for me was a divorce where I represented dad. Mom was a raging alcoholic that would bring random guys home many nights from the bar while the dad was working. I saw video and heard phone calls from their little boy calling the dad at work at like 2 AM because he was tired. But couldn't go to sleep because mom was playing loud music and had friends over still partying. I was on the right side of that one. But seeing and hearing that stuff with the little boy really got to me. Did the dad win custody? Oh yeah. Slam dunk for him on that part. She only got supervised visits only. And sadly didn't really adhere to that either. Last I heard she moved back with family in Ohio to sober up and have surgery done on a polyp from all of the drinking. It's still sad after all that though. Since the little boy stays with a close friend of the dad's at night while the dad works. Normally we would have them stay with family. But the dad didn't have any around. So he doesn't really get to see his son too much until his days off. Not me, but my brother is a criminal defense attorney. He worked as a contracted public defender for a few years after starting his own business to get some guaranteed income while building his client base. The catch with these contracts is you're not able to refuse clients. He had to defend a guy that had repeatedly raped his toddler daughter while the mom watched. When I asked him about how he got through it, he said, "When I get to the point where the crime is so heinous that I can't empathize with my client, I switch my frame of thought from how will I get this guy reduced or no time to how can I ensure this guy won't have a chance at a mistrial." So essentially, he copes by making sure that everyone from the police, to the jailers, to the prosecution team are 100% on the up and up so that when this guy gets found to be guilty, there's no way he'll get set free on a technicality. Please don't ask for specifics. Had a case where a guy shot and killed a security guard that slapped him across the face for selling drugs near a store. I knew the guy had done it. It was closed at midnight. The crime scene had poor lighting and the shooter wore a hoodie. Only eyewitness that showed up for the trial had told the police at the time of the crime that the suspect was black. The defendant wasn't Caucasian but wasn't black either. That, emo, was the argument that won the jury over. Defendant found not guilty. He thanks me while in tears. His mother and grandmother bring me cake and a thank you note afterwards. Less than a year later I'm watching the news and they're reporting a crime where a crew held up 3 families hostage while robbing their apartments. They beat up the janitor very bad. They tied the families up and locked them in one of the apartment's bathroom while threatening to throw a grenade inside if any of them decided to wisen up. For a brief second one of the robbers looks right into an elevator camera before spray painting it. Close up on the guy's face. I think you can imagine whose face I was looking at. Edit. To everyone asking. He was identified but never caught. Managed to stay on the run for maybe a year and a half and was later held over some drug related debt. This is my first case and I'm currently working on it now. But it feels largely morally reprehensible, antitrust case where our client has been indeed manipulating the market in shoddy ways. However, I'm not defending the client's practices. I'm merely advising him. Which means I tell him in pages of legalese to cut the bullshit because that sheet will land you big as fines. What about Disney? You try going against Disney and see how much they'll ravage what you think you know of the legal system. Not my case. But at a previous firm, a partner sent out a firm-wide email congratulating his team on a great win. It detailed how their win meant that our client, giant fossil fuel company, wasn't liable for damage to the environment caused by leaks in their pipes. Instead, the taxpayers would be covering the cost. The partner went on to say something to the effect of this saves our client $X billion a year in environmental cleanup and pipe maintenance. For some reason, even though it wasn't my case, that one has always stuck with me. At the end of the email, on an unrelated note, please continue to boil your drinking water due to pollution concerns. Well, fresh after law school, I worked on a case where the people involved were sketchy in every possible way. My role was very limited. I was just helping with some securities filings. The problem was that nothing quite added up, and when I brought the discrepancies over to my boss, she just told me to put the information in anyway. She was very friendly with the client. We saw him at our office all the goddamn time, as he'd often just drop by to chat and hang. Years later, the company folded, in a manner of speaking, and their clients, many of whom were quite vulnerable, lost hundreds of millions of dollars. I was not at all surprised. My boss was someone whom I had dreamed of reporting for years, for that and other sketchiness. But she was slippery enough never to do anything wrong that didn't carry some level of plausible deniability. Additionally, I'd always felt like I had zero idea of what I was doing as a student and then first year associate there. Further still, I felt powerless against someone who had built herself quite a reputation within the legal community here, and who had been known to act vindictively toward anyone who crossed her in the past. In any case, I do think about that old file often. It's not the only one we worked on at that old firm that eventually blew up in a bad way. It's also really not great to feel like you may have helped legitimize an entirely, and to me, obviously, fraudulent operation. My experience there definitely jaded me quite a bit, even compared to other junior lawyers. A close relative was a judge in a pretty small town in the 80s. There was a case. Drug deal gone bad. I guess one guy went to his dealer's trailer. Guy planned to rob dealer. Not only take his drugs but his money as well. Dealer picked up on that plan quickly and pulled out a gun. First guy pulled out his gun as well. Both died. Suicide by stupidity. Really. The families ended up suing each other for wrongful death. $. Relatives spent a couple of days going over the law before they arrived in court, each wanting to get rid of the other for money. Relative, while on the bench no less, said something to the effect of they both did society a favor by removing themselves from our society. Early 80s, not a chance for that statement to go viral the way it would now, but you can bet the week following the letters to the editor in the local paper blew up. I only include this because the prosecutor was laughing so hard he had to excuse himself from the room when the judge made the comment. My friend's dad is an attorney. He started out in criminal defense and lucked out on one of his first cases. A friend he'd known for years' wife was horribly murdered while he was away. Dismembered with an axe. Her body had been found by a fluke, and there was a tiny bit of circumstantial evidence pointing to the husband. He was an upstanding citizen. The two had never fought. It was a silly case. The lawyer got the husband acquitted, and while they were having celebratory drinks, the husband admitted he'd actually done it. My friend's dad walked out of the bar and switched to corporate law. Video editor, not a lawyer. I make lots of tapes for lawyers, harsh depositions, evidentiary stuff. Getting to the good stuff in a 12-hour surveillance tape. I have even had to pixelate everyone's face but the suspects in hospital surveillance tape due to HIPAA. Sometimes the state will ask me to recover very bad audio from criminal investigations or see if I can see fraudulent editing on a tape. Debunker James O'Keefe copycat. I don't see the whole case and never know the outcomes. I just get a ton of raw input. Video can lie and so can mine. A thing I felt bad about was working for the defense in a civil suit. New worker had his legs crushed at a loading dock. We get our cameras and are working for the company to show how the loading dock is supposed to be done and all their safety equipment working. They have their best guy to demo the stuff. The old salt employee. He can't make the safety latches work at 2 of the 3 loading docks. The one that does work doesn't work reliably. It is obvious they never use this stuff. But the video is edited and it looks like the company and safety equipment are slick and functional, run by the most seasoned pros. Not a specific case, but viewing child pornography was pretty uncomfortable. As a defense attorney, you would go to the prosecutor's office to view the discovery files as they are prohibited from releasing it outside the office. So you go in and sit down in a small room and a legal secretary brings you the discs with the files on them. On one case, I had to view the files more than once. So imaging rolling in saying, "Hey, need to see that kid's big dig again. Thanks." Also representing parents in juvenile where I was fighting to return kids to pretty broken homes. Most of the time it didn't bother me. But in one case I represented a dad whose baby mama had just had these adorable twins. These parents were absolute sheetheads. Now a lot of times, the foster families are one small step above the parents themselves, not people I would ever hire to babysit my kids. But in this case, the foster parents were a couple of 30-somethings who I presume couldn't have kids of their own. They would show up to court with the infant twins. And they bought them new dress clothes for each court date. So cute. They wanted to adopt the kids. Should the parental rights of the bio parents be terminated? So I felt pretty bad showing up trying to get the kids returned to the dad. I left that job before that case was completed. But I assume it had a happy ending. The judge was never going to return the kids to the parents. So I like to think the couple has them now. 2 things. 1. I honestly don't think it's morally reprehensible to provide an adequate legal defense to anyone. Lawyers just present the client's argument and make sure the other side doesn't take shortcuts. It's up to the jury to listen to the evidence and make the final call, not the lawyers. 2. Why are there never any questions asking about our most personally satisfying cases? My firm takes on a lot of refugee asylum cases pro bono. And bloody hell, talking with someone who has barely escaped with his or her life and now has a chance to start again in a new country makes me glad to be a lawyer. Did a bail hearing back in my 2nd year of practice as duty counsel. Think public defender type role. The guy had trapped his girlfriend in the cab of his pickup. Twisted one arm up behind her back to her shoulder and broke it. Then did the other side. I had to run the bail hearing for him, while she and her family were sitting in the front row of the court. She had both arms in casts and in slings. Thankfully, his surety, the person posting his bail, melted down on the stand and we had to adjourn. By the time he was up for bail again, he'd retained private counsel, who put the same surety up on the stand even after I warned him not to, in front of the same justice. Upside? He got detained. I don't typically do family law, but I have a case where we suspected the mother had Munchausen by proxy. Which, if you've seen the Hulu movie Gypsy, you know how messed up it is. The child was always fine with the dad, but mom would take the child to the doctor every other day. When they didn't give the answer mom wanted, she'd get a second, third, etc. opinion. Mom was oddly close to the nurses and doctors. Child had some type of cancer where child needed a colostomy bag and mom didn't clean it. It was infected so bad that child can't wear it anymore and child is getting more sick and dying. Mom, allegedly, pushed her child in the shower and it messed up their head. It's possible mom is feeding her Drugas too because child puked blood from time to time. Now the child has seizures once a week from the shower incident. Mom spent $400,000 on medical bills in 1 year. Mom made a fraudulent GoFundMe and only used $200 of the thousands received on medical bills. The page has since been removed, and the case is still open until we can find more experts to testify. During my days of insurance defense, I spent one lovely afternoon bickering with counsel for a co-defendant over who would be responsible for paying the $5,000 that was keeping us from settling. We did this while on site at the plaintiff's home for a deposition. Plaintiff was hit by a semi-truck, that is, the truck hit his actual body, on the interstate. And while it managed not to kill him, it tore off an arm and a leg. And shattered most of everything else. He was almost entirely immobile. Confined to a power chair that he could barely operate. And confided to us that if he had function in his remaining hand, he'd shoot himself. Oh. The $5,000? It was based on an estimate to renovate his bathroom so that he could actually use it. He'd been pissing and cheating in a bedpan in the living room. I felt like a complete duck sitting in front of him and arguing about such an insignificant sum. Yeah man. You got to have some pretty thick skin or be a total sociopath to work for the insurance companies. I don't blame you since you're just trying to get paid. But I feel like it would get pretty dark screwing people over for a living. Legal, smart, and moral are very different terms which don't necessarily go together in legal work. Actions can definitely be all three. I think the toughest decisions are moral, legal, but not smart. The most morally challenging case is the one where a client has been wronged, but circumstances make holding someone to account too difficult or expensive to be accomplished. Telling a client you have been hurt by someone who did something illegal, but you can't do anything about it. Sorry really sucks. Disclaimer, none of the below is legal advice. Don't take legal advice from randos on the interwebs. Bringing a medical malpractice action can be really expensive. Some states require you hire a medical expert to present certain evidence. Some states cap the amount of damages you can recover. I've seen some egregious behavior shrugged off because the probably at fault party knows that most people can't afford to bring the case. Every case is a big deal to individual clients. Losing or getting a bad outcome is never fun. But telling a client that someone is going to skate because it's too expensive feels morally worse. In some areas of law, you get a bit of everything. I'm in one of those areas. I do not do family law. But I had one case where an ex-husband and ex-wife were against each other. Both were completely fraudulent. Both were trying to use their young daughter against the other. One was a chronic cheater opportunist and the other was constantly high or drunk and constantly trying to access his former wife's financials. She was quite well off when they got together. This was not a divorce case. But due to the nature of the case, all attorneys involved were privy to the entire accord of their divorce. I feel like our client edged out our opposition very minutely in being a slightly better person. But it was a hollow victory. Not a lawyer. But my ex-wife had her father represent her in her divorce against me where she won full custody of my kids. This was my former father-in-law of 16 years. So, we have a lawyer who prevented his son-in-law from being able to see his own kids. Pretty morally reprehensible in my book. I used to do a lot of enforcement court cases, where we would use lines in properties to cover losses on loans on behalf of our clients, banks and such. Had one case where the debtor was very eager to talk about the debt and how he really wanted to repay our client according to the agreed repayment plan. How he was trying to come up with a way to get the money etc. etc. The beating dragged on for an hour. These cases usually took less than 10 minutes. Since the debtor very rarely had any other way of repaying the loan. And he seemed very eager to tell me about why he was in debt in the first place. I finally asked him out of curiosity why he had taken out the debt. And it turned out his son, who was around my age, had terminal cancer. And he and his wife had sold everything they owned and took out huge loans with their house as security to provide him with the best possible treatment, and eventually hospice. And, as he said it, now my son is gone but the debt is not. All I could do was warn him about the planned foreclosure for weeks later. If he did not find a way to repay as promised. Turned out he did find a way to come up with the money. But I still think a lot about that case. I'm an immigration lawyer. So the worst I see are people trying to pass off fraudulent marriages for green cards. Or bogus asylum cases. Years ago, I was a junior attorney at a firm and handled a removal of conditions on permanent residency case. If you marry someone and sponsor them for a green card. If you've been married less than 2 years. The first green card is conditional and for 2 years. You have to file additional paperwork in order to get a normal 10-year green card. This is designed to help weed out fraudulent cases. So my boss hands me a removal of conditions case. I meet the husband. South American. Tanned in Midwest winter. Soap opera star handsome. Totally fit. Dressed in expensive clothes and dripping with gold jewelry. I put together the paperwork. And he and the wife come in separately to sign off. She's about 15 years older than him. Short. Dumpy. Homely. Dressed in old. Frumpy clothes. She tells me that in his culture, couples don't kiss. And don't have sex unless they want to have children. And he's not ready to be a father yet. Because of his work. He mostly stays in a co-worker's spare bedroom on the other side of the city. She gives me photos of them together as proof of their marriage. A bunch are from his most recent birthday. It's in a club. She's the only woman in the photos. All the other guys are shirtless. Most have glitter on their bodies. I ask a fellow attorney who is gay what he thinks. He recognizes the club as a gay bar that he's been to. We still filed it. Without the club photos. And he got his regular green card. Not a lawyer. But a lawyer's assistant. My boss asked me to falsify the signature of a recently dead man in order to have a will validated. In my country when a person dies, it takes up to 4 days to have the act registered. And in that time frame my boss legalized a secret will in which one of the sons of the deceased would be substantially benefited. It was of course her client. MLMs are considered pyramid schemes in my country and both are banned in order to protect consumers. It's a crime to establish an MLM. Public prosecution here got wind of an MLM operating and shut it down. Closing up the premises and everything. My firm was hired by the MLM to defend their case and establish to the public prosecution that they should be able to continue to operate. I had to prep all the defenses while absolutely despising MLMs and thinking that they are run and operated by predatory pieces of shit. We had several high-up employees from the MLM's head office in the US fly halfway across the world to us multiple times for status update meetings, lasting 15-30 minutes or so. That could have literally been done over email or conference call. Nope, they just had so much money to burn off the backs of vulnerable people who have zero chance of succeeding in their business that a gang of them would fly over every so often to ask, so how's it going? I thanked my lucky stars every time the public prosecution rejected one of our arguments and eventually the MLM gave up and cleared out of the country. Never been so happy that my arguments were unsuccessful. I worked defense before becoming a prosecutor 2 years ago. The hardest case was a guy who was accused of molesting his family friend's daughters, who were 5 at the time. He hired us. He didn't want to register as a sex offender and didn't want to do any jail time. We knew he did it. We heard his interview with the police. Yet we had to defend him to the best of our ability. We trawled through the family friend's Facebook accounts, finding sexually suggestive photos to show that the kids learned this on their own. We said they were coached by their vindictive grandmother. It felt disgusting and repugnant. It was our job, but damn. It left a bad taste in my mouth. I left and became a domestic violence and sexual assault prosecutor. Which I still do.